Welcome to the Vintage Ballers Podcast. I'm your host, Brad Coreno. And on today's episode, we have former NBA player Dennis Hopson joining the show. Dennis became Ohio State men's basketball all-time leading scorer back in the 1980s before joining the NBA, where he played for the Nets, Kings, and Chicago Bulls, where in 1991 he won a championship with Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, and the Bulls. So without further ado, welcome Dennis Hopson. Well, I appreciate you coming on the show, Dennis. We connected through Ian Cunningham, who runs the Kenny Anderson Showcase, and I know he had told me you attended, and we had talked about that, and you said, hey, you should talk to Dennis, and of course, I'm very, very familiar with you because your Ohio State days, everyone knows you in Ohio, and and then your Chicago Bulls days as well, and your New Jersey Nets days. So I grew up as a little kid with an older brother who was a big basketball player as well, and he was watching all the games when I was younger with you and all the guys at Ohio State, and then of course you had he knew Jim Jackson, Thunderbrook, and those guys, so it was really right after you left is when I really got into Ohio State basketball, but everyone knew Dennis Hopson. So
I appreciate it, man. It's an honor to be on the show. Looking forward to it. Ian and Kenny, I actually got a chance to watch the podcast with those guys and met Ian. And Ian actually came and watched us play. We played a game in Cleveland. In the Cleveland area, I should say, last year. He came and watched us play, and we've been close ever since, man. And me and Kenny, we've been close for a long time. So I appreciate you having me on the show.
Oh, it's great to have you. And again, seeing where Ohio State is too with football right now, I think a lot of fans, a lot of people are Ohio State really, as in this state is a religion to a lot of people. So, football and basketball. So it's kind of, your name is synonymous with that, that Buckeye, that Buckeye lore. So it's definitely cool to have you on the show. And I grew up watching, like I said, really the Thunderbrook Jackson days all the way through Scooney Penn, Michael Redd, Ken Johnson, all those guys. Ohio State had a slew of great teams for a while. And they've had some downturns, but for the most part, they've had some very good teams over the past 30, 40 years.
So I appreciate it, man. Yeah, I appreciate it.
So let's get started with your childhood. You grew up in Toledo. When did you fall in love with the game of basketball, Dennis?
Honestly, I think, and you're going to be shocked and surprised, but honestly, love for the game is probably my sophomore year in college.
Really?
Now I know you're gonna think that sounds kind of strange and crazy, but I think I was a guy that was gifted and talented when I played the game, and I was able to get by with just liking the game. But I think my love for the game actually grew after my freshman year at Ohio State, to be honest with you. And it's funny because I didn't even play as a freshman in high school. So, I played my sophomore, junior, and senior year and was able to make a splash. And again, just kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out type of thing. But I really fell in love with it after my freshman year, going into my sophomore year at Ohio State.
When you were younger, obviously you had a lot of talent. When did you realize I could play major college basketball and I could play at an Ohio State?
I think after my sophomore year in high school, going into my junior year, and I'll back up a little bit. It was one of those things where, Brad, a lot of people saw talent in me that I probably didn't see in myself because I was a very immature kid when I was coming up. I like to do kid things. So I was very immature, but a lot of coaches that were around me, they saw the talent in me. And, kept pushing me to play and talking to my parents about playing. And so I'm going to give a lot of credit to those guys that I were around, coaches and mentors that I was around at a very young age that recognized a gift and a talent in me. So, again, I thought in answering your question, I could play at somewhere in college after high school was after my junior year. Because, again, I didn't play as a freshman. I played as a sophomore, and at the end of my sophomore year, I started playing varsity in the tournament and got some minutes, not a whole lot, but I made the most of the minutes that I got, and one thing led to another.
Where did you go to high school?
I went to Toledo Bowser.
Okay. And did you, at the time, was Coach Miller at Ohio State kind of looking at you at that time, or was that something that came on later your senior year? How did that come about?
Well, I think after my junior year, the end of my junior year, going into my senior year, I started getting recruited by a lot of people. And it's funny because a lot of people don't know this, but I actually committed to University of Cincinnati
Oh,
when
really?
Ed Badger was there. Went on a couple of visits, unofficial visits, and they were in a metro. They were in a metro conference.
Now, who was in that
Memphis,
conference?
Memphis, and Louisville, teams like that back in the day. So the conference was big time. And I never forget, went and they were playing a game, and I said, man, this was incredible. It's unbelievable. And one thing led to another, ended up committing to Cincinnati. And then during that time, I think in the summer, going to my senior year, Ed Badger had gotten fired. He got fired. I'm sorry, after my senior year, he got fired. And that's when things opened up. And I don't know if they called it decommit back in the day. I mean, that was so long ago, but our kids decommit. That's what I did, and ended up going to Ohio State.
Well, it worked out well for Ohio State, that's for sure.
So, I appreciate it. Thank you.
When with Coach Miller, he was there for the first 3 years. Then you had Gary Williams, obviously, who turned into a legend after that and winning a championship with Maryland. What was it like playing for Coach Miller and Coach Williams?
Two totally different coaches. Learned a lot from both. And I had Coach Miller for 3 years. I had, like you said, I had Gary for 1. But under Coach Miller, and I'll never forget my freshman year, I think I averaged about 5 points a game. But it's funny, I started a lot of games as a freshman. But he was the type of coach, he was big on fundamentals. And he was big on you waiting your turn. He was that type of coach. But again, I thought that the fundamentals that, like we do today, in my practices, the skill work for 20 minutes. It means so much, and it meant so much to me back in the day. And again, I thought it helped my development. Again, I appreciate him for my time with him because he, again, basic basketball coach, taught you the basic of basketball. Now, on the other hand, Gary Williams was the type of guy, when he got there, he was the type of guy, hey, I don't have time to be teaching fundamentals of basketball. You guys are on a high major level. You should know how to play basketball. I'm ready to implement my offense and my defense. Here's a basketball, go play. Okay, and it's funny because my junior year before Coach Miller got fired, we played Boston College on national TV, CBS, in the Garden. And we played Boston, and they flat out kicked our butts that year, okay? Towards the end of my junior year, when Coach Miller got let go, which was before the season ended, we ended up winning the NIT that year. So now, I averaged 20 points a game, led a team in score. It's one of those things where, okay, coach is leaving, who's coming in? As a junior going into their senior year, after having a good junior year, hey, my senior year needed to be better than my junior year. And that was only, that was going to depend on myself and the next person that was going to come in and take Coach Miller's place. Well, when they hired Gary Williams, it was like, okay, this might work because they pressed the whole game. They pressed us the whole game. And it's funny because when he got there, I had a meeting with him. You're going to be the main guy. We need for you to be at the top of the press. Okay. We need you to use your length and do what you can do. And it worked out because we pressed the whole game, half court or full court. I got a lot of steals. I was at the top of the press. Those steals turned into easy buckets. And I ended up averaging 29 points something a game that year. So, again, I that was one of those things where I was blessed as a player. And, again, both of them taught me a lot about the game during my journey at Ohio State.
Did you end up, on a side note, did you end up seeing Coach Williams, all the success you end up having, of course, after that? Did you see that coming? I mean, you see in him, this great coach that would coach another, 20 years and win a national championship. At the time, was that something that you kind of saw him doing later in his career?
Yeah, I thought that he would have stayed at Ohio State a little longer, but again, he played at Maryland. So, hey, if the Maryland opportunity presented itself, he made the right choice. And yeah, I could see Coach Williams coaching for a long time because he was very energetic. He was very passionate about the game. So, and he was young. Brad, he was young. When I had him, he was a young coach. So, I don't know, 30 plus something. I know he wasn't in his 40s. So,
he was really young.
Yeah. That meant that he was going to have another 20 years in him before he retired. So, I mean, again, he was a successful guy, and I can understand why.
And I can remember a lot of those ACC battles, watching Maryland and Carolina and Duke, and he's always on the sidelines running around, So it's when I remember him. I remember that he coached Ohio State. I didn't realize he had coached you. So I saw he coached you for a year. I thought that was pretty interesting. So you had, did you play with Tony Campbell?
Yeah, Tony was a freshman. No, I was a freshman when Tony was a senior. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
Yep. I knew Campbell was there in the 80s. I wasn't sure exactly when, but okay.
Yep, Tony was again. Actually, it's funny because I saw Tony, man, outside of us competing against each other in the NBA for the first time back in Columbus 2 years ago. That was the first time he had been back to Columbus for an event since he graduated.
Wow.
So, you know, we got a chance to talk, you know, outside of competing against one another on the NBA hardwood, I'm sorry. So, you know, it was good seeing him, but Tony could play, man. And again, when I talked about Coach Miller allowing the older guys to have their time and bringing the young guys along slow, that's the first person that comes to mind my freshman year, Tony Campbell. It was Tony Campbell's show. And we deferred to Tony, and that's the way Coach Miller operated.
And Tony had a brief stint here in Cleveland, actually, with the Cavs. I believe him and Thunder Dan played here for a year, I think, in '96. So it was funny. I remember, you know, thinking, oh, it's a Ohio State guy coming here. And that was back 25 years ago. But yeah, so for those of you young kids who don't know, Tony Campbell played for Ohio State, a very good NBA player, and also played for the Cavaliers for a little bit.
That's right.
If you go back now, senior year at Ohio State, you know, are you thinking, okay, I'm going to be drafted in the NBA? I mean, what's your thought process at that point? I know you're trying to win and trying to enjoy college, but are you kind of thinking like, yeah, I can go pro?
Well, you know, I think that happened. First of all, I didn't have the expectations of being a pro when I went to college. Like a lot of kids today, if you ask kids today what they want to be, the first thing they're going to say is some type of professional or a music person, okay? I didn't look at it that way. I didn't have those type of expectations for myself. What I thought after my junior year, I had an opportunity because now, you know, you're making an all Big Ten team. Your name is being mentioned. I led the team in scoring. I played with Brad Sellers.
Yep.
Brad was a senior that year.
Cleveland guy.
Yep. Exactly. He's a Cleveland guy. And Brad went on to the NBA, and he had a draft party. He didn't actually go to the draft that year. He had a draft party at his house, and I was there at the draft party. And that's when it started to click a little bit. Like, man, this is pretty nice. You know, if I have the opportunity to take my skills on to the next level, hey, man, this is going to be great because, you know, you see all the nice things that Brad was doing and being able to play at the next level against guys that you watched on TV for a long time coming up. It's like, hey, man, you know, I got a shot. So, you know, that summer going into my senior year, it was one of those things to where you kind of you commit to yourself. You know what I mean? You hold yourself at a high standard, and it's like, hey, man, you know what? I'm going to do what I need to do to try to parlay this and take it to the next level. So that's what I did. But yeah, I think after my junior year is when I started thinking that I could be an NBA player.
And did you I mean, back then, you look at college and the NBA back then, and Dennis, that was obviously the time where it exploded, you know, basketball in general, because, you know, when I obviously I wasn't around back in the 60s and 70s, but from what I've been told, it wasn't like it was in the 80s and 90s where it just blew up. And now it's international. Now, besides soccer, you can say basketball is probably the second most popular sport in the world. I mean, it's everywhere. And, you know, it was really your generation that made it that way and that kind of gave it a global name. Obviously, MJ had a big, you know, that. But I mean, there's a lot of other people who played, Magic Johnson, Bird, those guys, you know, that they played a big role in kind of expanding the game. Dr. J. So, you know, did you guys realize something special was going on back in those days in the 80s and early 90s, or was it not something you thought about? You know, do you know that game?
I'm not going to say we didn't think about it. I think, you know, when you talk about Magic Johnson, that was one of the reasons why we're number 32 at Ohio State, you know, because, you know, coming up and being able to watch very few games on TV. But when you did get a chance to watch some games on TV and you got a chance to watch the Michigan States and you heard about this kid named Magic Johnson. And when I watched him play, it was one of those things like, man, oh man, you know, 6'9" playing a point guard and watching some of the incredible things that he could do with that basketball, you know, on the basketball court. It's like, yeah, I knew that the game was trending in the right direction. And then again, me and Mike were a couple years difference in age. So he was there before me, but hearing his name and watching him at North Carolina before he actually went pro and watching him in the pros, it's like, man, these guys are very, very competitive. So, you know, there was the greats, like you just mentioned, the Magics, the Michaels, the Isaiahs, the Larry Birds, you know, it was just, you knew the game was going and tracking in the right direction.
Okay. I mean, it just seems interesting because I was a kid then in the 80s. I was born in the 80s and the early 80s. So I grew up with the game. I mean, it was big my entire life. But I didn't realize that it wasn't as big before I was born. I always thought that everyone watched, because all my generation watched the NBA and college basketball. That was our big thing. I mean, at one time, college basketball was probably bigger than college football. I mean, now college football is a huge, huge deal. But in our generation, we watched just as much college basketball with Tim Duncan and Vince Carter and Rasheed, all those guys. So, you know, back then it's just interesting how it blew up. And again, MJ has the big reason why, but there's a lot of different people that played a role in that. And, your generation really was the first generation that blew it up. And, it's interesting to me to look how it is now, where anyone I talk to around the world is they know every NBA player, everyone knows the game. And, back then it wasn't like that 40, 50 years ago as much,
Right.
But it is like that now. So let's get to the draft. It was 1987. What was your thoughts going into that? And did you have any contact with New Jersey before that?
Yeah, I went to Phoenix. Phoenix had a number 2 pick. I went to Jersey. They had the 3rd pick, and I went to the Clippers. They had the 4th pick. Okay, those were the only teams that I visited during that time for my interviews and my workouts. And it was myself and Reggie Williams out of Georgetown.
Oh yeah,
we were the number 1 and 2 best guards coming out that year. Even though you had your Reggie Millers, you had a lot of Reggie Lewises, you had a lot of great ones coming out, but we were ranked 1 and 2. Okay, people like Reggie, they would have put him 1. Me 2. People like me, they would put me 1, put Reggie number 2. So I knew that I was going to go from what people were saying between 2 and 4. Okay. Now that's the year that David Robinson came out, even though David couldn't play the first couple years because of his obligations with the Navy. But I knew there was going to be either 2 through 4. Okay. I guess New Jersey liked my workout, and they told me that they were going to draft me number 3. But had Reggie went number 3, then I would have went number 4 to the Clippers. So it would have been 3 or 4, because Armand Gilliam went to Phoenix at number 2.
Yep.
So again, like I said, it could have went either way. Myself, Reggie, myself.
I didn't realize all the great names that came out that year. You name a lot of.
It was a lot.
I forgot about Reggie Lewis.
There was a lot of Reggie Lewis, Reggie Miller, Scottie Pippen, Horace Grant.
Wow, that's a heck of a draft.
Kenny Smith. Yeah, we had a lot of good ones. David Robinson. We had a lot of good ones, So, again, it was just an honor for the people that were, the owners of teams and the people that were going to be drafted thought enough of me to make me a high pick.
Now, when you were drafted by New Jersey, what was the culture like there? Because I knew Buck Williams obviously was there. Yeah. And I think John Bagley and those guys, Roy Hinson. Who else was there, and what was the culture like going into it? Because that was pre-Kenny Anderson, Derek Coleman days. It was, and obviously they ended up trading Buck to, Portland and that whole thing. But what was it like in 1987, 88 with the Nets?
It was great guys. Pearl Washington out of Syracuse, he was drafted the year before me. And they had Otis Birdsong. You mentioned Buck. You mentioned Roy Hinson. You mentioned Bags. There were some great players there. I think the big thing was the organization, again, and I'm not knocking them, great organization, but you had 11, 12 owners, okay? And New Jersey had went through multiple coaches. They went through 4 coaches when I was there. My 3 years there, they had 4 different coaches that I played for. So, again, I don't know that they were real stable at that time, because there was so much movement going on when I was there, to where it made it tough as a player. And then before I got there, they weren't winning a lot of games, because before then they had Michael Ray Richardson, and I think he went down because of the scandal or whatever. Otis Birdsong, those guys could play. New Jersey was popping off maybe, 4 or 5 years, 6 years before I got there. But again, I think as time, before I got there, I'm sorry, they it was tough. It was tough for me coming from Ohio State, used to winning, okay, going to a program to where we didn't win as much. And then I'm going to tell you, Brad, the other big thing for me was going from, or being a Midwest guy, going to the East Coast. The East Coast was a little fast, and that was something, a lot of people, a lot of traffic, versus Ohio, where I can get somewhere in 10 minutes.
Yep.
In Jersey, New York, it's just a little different. So, at the age of 22, being away from home, being on the East Coast, dealing with a lot of different people, It was tough at times, man. So yeah, it was a lot of things played a part in a lot of different things for me.
What do you know when you look back at your New Jersey days? What's the summary in your mind of those days? Like, what did you learn? You know, what is just as far as the game goes, and also what did you learn off the court? You said you're talking about living on the East Coast. Obviously, you learned a lot there. But what did you learn on the court, and what did you learn in your personal life that kind of propelled you to the later part of your career, whether it was Chicago or other things you did?
I learned Buck Williams was a great mentor of mine. I'm gonna back up and say that. I mean, he really took me under his wing when I was a rookie in New Jersey, and but what I think again, coming from a family, mom and dad has been married over 70 years now. They're still living. I'm used to stability. I'm used to consistency. I think when I got to Jersey, it was one of those things to where it wasn't that way. So, you had to make that adjustment. And I don't know that was easy for me to make that adjustment at 22, living on my own, not having a family there, only being around the guys that I played with, not knowing anybody else on the East Coast. And again, I'm not making any excuses. I'm just, making a point. But it was tough at times. It was tough at times, but you have to grow up quick. You're playing in the league with grown men, and you can't sit around and feel sorry for yourself. But again, I wouldn't change a thing, man. Because I look at things that happen as as a lesson.
Mm-hmm.
And as my time went on, once I left New Jersey and got traded to Chicago, and I'm sure we're going to talk about that. It was tough for me because my first year in New Jersey, I averaged 9 points a game. Okay, the second year, I averaged 12 points something a game. My last year, I led the team in scoring. Okay, so I felt myself getting better every year, making the adjustment, being on the East Coast, making the adjustment. In regards to wins and losses, I was getting a feel for the game. Okay, because I felt that I was too relaxed as a player. I felt that take your time, Dennis. And Willis Reed would always say, "Hey, man, you're going to be okay. Just take your time, learn the game, and grow." But I felt that that's one thing I would say. If I could do it over again, I think I would be a lot more selfish than what I was when I was in New Jersey. Okay. But fast forward to Chicago, being traded there, it wasn't a happy trade for me. I had my basketball camp here in Toledo, and I got traded. Somebody walked in the gym, or I got a phone call, I'm sorry, that you were traded to Chicago. And it's like, why Chicago? Why Chicago? And me and Bill Fish didn't see eye to eye. So that could have been the reason why I was traded to Chicago, because you already know the first person I thought about when they mentioned that I was traded to Chicago, and that was Michael Jordan. Okay, now you just got through leading the team in scoring. Okay, your last year in Jersey. Now you're getting ready to go play behind the best player in the world. I wasn't too thrilled about that. And I didn't have anything to do with Michael. It didn't have anything to do with Michael. It's the fact that I had to play behind Michael. Mm-hmm. And it was tough.
That had to be tough. And they were kind of building a team already with Pippen and Horace and those
Mm-hmm.
impacts in, and they just put Phil as coach. So, I mean, like, at that time, and obviously a lot of people, this is something I'm sure a lot of people will want to hear about these next, few questions
Mm-hmm.
with the Bulls, because you were obviously a part of the first, what will become one of the greatest dynasties in the history of sports. But this is the first championship team of that dynasty. So, your mindset going into, obviously you're a little bit disappointed at this point. You have to play behind Michael. You're not going to get as many shots, as many minutes. Are you going into that training camp? What was it like? What was that team like? What was Phil Jackson like? And what was Michael like?
Going in, well, that summer when I got traded, when I told y'all that my basketball camp, I had knee surgery. Okay, I had knee surgery. So again, I coming off of knee surgery, I'm trying to strengthen my knee. Thinking in the back of my mind, you're getting ready to go play behind the best player to play the game at that time, and he will go down as one of the best players to play it. Mixed emotions. Okay, again, just thinking about, man, you led a team in scoring. Okay, you led a team New Jersey in scoring. Why Chicago? So again, it was one of those things. But got there, and I already knew Pip, and I knew Horace because we got drafted together. Okay, so I knew those guys even when they were in college. I knew who they were. And any other guys, your Bill Cartwrights, those are guys that you see on TV. Me and Cliff came in about the same time. They made a trade for myself and Cliff Livingston. All right, so again, we became very close. But you know what? I'm going to tell you the great thing about me being traded to Chicago, Brad, was it brought the fire it brought the energy back. It brought the passion back for the game of basketball when I was traded there. And this is the reason why. They had something in mind. The guys that were on that team, they had something in mind that they were trying to accomplish. They had a goal, and that was to win an NBA championship. And they were so close, okay? Could never get past Detroit. So the practices were very, very intense. The guys were very, very competitive. So it brought that drive, it brought that fire back that I think I started losing when I was in New Jersey, because I think the last year we may have went 19-54 or something like that. I can't recall. That could have been the first year, but I know we had a losing record. And that's just not always an easy thing when you're young and you're used to winning, okay? So being traded to Chicago, again, at the beginning, didn't understand why, okay? But during my time there, I could appreciate playing with those guys because no days off, man. They were going to make you work. They were going to make you play. They were going to challenge you. They were going to talk a lot of trash, man. They were going to make you play night in, night out.
Give us some of your favorite MJ stories in practice and in stuff that, we guarding him. What was it like to have to, because looking back now, I mean, there's a lot of kids, all my nephews, they know who Michael Jordan is, but the stories like this, I think, is what really intrigues people, because nobody knows except for people that faced him behind the scenes. We don't know what it's like to face a Michael Jordan or to play with a Michael Jordan. So, how would you describe that?
I'm going to say that he was very super, super competitive, man. And it's funny because you could be pulling up to the practice facility the same time, and you getting out of the car, he's getting out of the car. And it's the chatter is going to start there. The chatter is going to start there, and it's going to continue all the way when we get in the training room and we're getting our ankles taped. The red team is going to kill the white team. It's always a chatter. But, he's so competitive, man, and he brings out the competitive juices in everybody that he plays with, everybody he plays against, because, again, like you saw in his documentary, and I'm not going to go out on a limb and say that everything that was in that was true, but I will say that he was super, super competitive, man, no matter what. If he seen you on the freeway on the way to the game, I'm in my car, he's in his car, he's going to let the window down and say, hey, man, I bet you I get to the gym before you get to the gym, okay? So everything, Brad, was super, super competitive, man, and it's just something that you will never forget. It's something that you could tell people that ask a question about him, because people ask that question, how was Michael, okay? Something that you could tell your kids, he was that guy that was going to bring the best out of whoever he played against, man, because he was super, super competitive.
And did it, rubbing off on the teammates like you said it did, how did Phil Jackson incorporate everything? What did he bring to the table? Because obviously you had, some big personalities there. I mean, Michael and Phil alone are big personalities. How did that all mesh? And it seemed like Scotty kind of, was obviously we knew he was kind of the second guy behind Michael, but how did he fit in as well?
You got coaches and you have people that manage teams. Okay. And I think in the NBA, yeah, guys are going to coach, but I think they do more of managing guys in the pros. And the reason I say that, Brad, is because there's so much talent, man. There's so much talent on the professional level to where I'm not going to say that you can't coach, but like you just said, there's so many egos and talent to where these guys, they can pretty much coach themselves. You know what I mean? If you watch LeBron James and AD, if coach is not there, they probably can win a lot of games without coach being there, because they're super, super, they have knowledge for the game. They're very competitive, and they're going to play hard. And I think to answer your question in regards to Phil, he was a master, man. He was a master. He knew exactly what he had, and he did a nice job of managing / coaching. And I'm putting managing in front of coaching guys on that Chicago Bulls team.
What about the great Tex Winter and his influence on that team? I want to hear. We hear stories about him all the time as well. And Phil is, like you said, kind of the guy that, could, he's the one who kind of brought everybody together in a way and handled people. But what did Tex do X's and O's wise with the triangle offense?
Well, Tex was smart, man. He'd been around the game a long time, and that was an offense that he believed in. And I know he was there with Doug Collins, And I know he tried to implement that offense with Doug Collins, and Doug Collins wasn't trying to hear that, okay? When Doug left and Phil took over, Phil bought into Texas triangle offense. And it's funny because it's a very, very effective offense because it's allowing 5 guys to be involved in the offense, okay? Now, I love it enough to put that offense in with me coaching, but at the end of the day, you got to be a smart basketball player in order to use that offense, okay? Because it's reads. Depending on where the ball goes is going to depend on where you move to, okay? Now, Michael and Scotty was probably the only 2 that had the freedom to break out of the offense and use their own individual skill, okay? But again, great offense, okay? Very effective offense. And if you have high IQ guys that can understand it and execute it, you can really carve a lot of teams up by running that offense.
What was that 91 season like for you in the regular season? We'll get to the playoffs in a second, but what was the regular season like?
It was tough. I don't know that I averaged double-figure minutes, averaged 4 points a game, backed Michael up, got spotty minutes. Again, knee wasn't 100%, so, knee was kind of gimpy. So now I'm playing behind the best player to play the game, and my knee wasn't fully healed. I think I came back too early. Again, it was frustrating, man. I had my days. I had my days, and I can't lie, that where I went home and doubted myself and doubted my skill and my playing ability. So, again, I'm 55 years old now. I can handle and deal with a lot more now than what I could back then. Because, again, you're young. You want to play. You came out of school leading the nation as the second leading scorer in the nation. You're known as a scorer. So, again, it played on me a little bit. And, again, if I had to do it over again, it would be very few things that I would change, man. And the biggest change would be my mindset.
And I would be the same. I don't know anybody that can go from being the second leading scorer in the nation to, being a backup behind somebody. Obviously, Michael, I mean, there was nobody that would start over Michael. It doesn't matter who you are. Reggie Miller wouldn't have started over Michael, so it doesn't matter. But the point is, being where you were to where you are, that team, I can understand that mindset. I would be the same way. I think everybody listening would be the same way. So that had to be challenging, but obviously it worked out pretty well for you in the end with what happened in these playoffs. But, take us through that time going into the playoffs with your mindset and the team's mindset. They had lost to Detroit last couple of seasons in the playoffs. Pretty brutal series, obviously, and some of the most physical in NBA history. What were the practices like leading up to that series?
Like you said, brutal. And when you talk about Michael, and this is a story that I would tell kids or whoever asks. What you see on the court during games is the same thing you're going to experience in practice. Okay, that's what I love him about, and I love him even more because of he never took days off. Because the game has changed. It's completely different from now. There's no such thing as load management or whatever they call it now back in the day, okay? He never took a day off. The fouls today is different from the fouls back then, okay? I don't know if they even had referees back in the day, and I'm exaggerating, Brad, because it wasn't a whole lot of fouls called, okay?
No, there weren't.
You had to play through it, okay? So he took a beat, but this is what I loved about Mike. He never, ever would sit out of practice, and Phil would try to make him sit out of practice. But his whole thing is that I'm not going to sit out of practice, because if I start sitting out of practices, guys that I'm playing with will feel that it's okay to sit out of practice, okay? So he just kept everybody in line. That's what I loved about him, okay? He set that example, okay? He wasn't one of those guys where I don't want to practice today. I don't want to do this today, okay? He kept everybody in line. And I think as a team, they had painted a picture and put themselves in this picture in regards to what they were after and what they were looking for and what they were trying to accomplish. So again, I appreciate him for the way that he led the team, and he wasn't a vocal guy, okay? And he didn't have to be vocal because his work ethic was enough, okay? And then I appreciate the team because everybody in that locker room was on the same page and had the same goal, even though all teams are very, very cliquish. Okay, I'm going to hang with B.J. Armstrong. I'm going to hang with Stacey King, okay? Horace is going to hang with Scotty. We didn't have to hang hang with each other. But at the end of the day, when we came together, we knew exactly what we were trying to accomplish as a team.
It's just a cool thing to see where that team came from. And, and that was, I mean, for you, Dennis, to be a part of that first championship, which will always be known as the first of that dynasty. And, it's probably, especially against Magic Johnson and the Lakers, and we'll get to that in a second. But, I mean, that's a pretty infamous team to be a part of. And, going into that series against Detroit, did you guys, I mean, obviously you ended up wiping them out, but like, did you guys, what was the, the energy like going into that series? And did you really think like, okay, we're going to destroy these guys?
High energy. Okay. More importantly, very focused. Everybody was super, super focused. Again, even when I wasn't there, okay, before I got traded, like you talked about earlier, the Lambeers, the Isaiah Thomases, the Joe Dumars, everybody used to watch those series, okay? And they knew that Mike was super, super close in trying to accomplish, or getting over the hump, I should say, against them, okay? So no messing around, okay? Practices were very intense. We were very, very focused. We went in there, we believed, okay? We believed. It wasn't, hey, we get ready to play the bad boys and, we might win, we might not win. We were focused, and everybody believed that we were going to overtake what they had been doing in Chicago in the years before that. So it was a focus, man. It was a focus, and it was a goal that we had, and we knew if we could get by them, hey, we could win the rest of the series the other teams that we played.
And what is your opinion about them walking off the court afterwards? Did that bother you like it bothered MJ and some of the other guys?
At that time, I don't know. I think we were so happy, at least myself. Again, I'll take it all the way back to where I told you I was very, very immature, okay? So that kind of thing didn't faze me, okay? I think, again, I paid more attention to it when I watched the documentary with Michael's documentary in the summer. But I think at that time, no, I was more excited about being a part of a team that went to the I'm talking about NCAA, but the NBA, okay, the playoffs. I was just excited because we hadn't done that in 3 years in New Jersey, so I was excited to have that opportunity to go through that.
And at that time, that was Chicago's first ever finals. I mean, they hadn't been to the finals before, and really the Chicago before MJ got there was basketball wise was not very good. So, I mean, it was a team that everybody kind of forgot about in Chicago for a while. And that now you're there and it's a team that everybody's watching. Mm-hmm. So going into that final, the NBA finals against, Magic, what was that like to see? I mean, you're on a team with Michael Jordan, Scottie, those guys, Phil, and you're facing, Magic Johnson and really the end of the Showtime Lakers. They didn't have Kareem, but still, Worthy and Vlade and those guys. Mm-hmm. What was that like? And what was the mindset going into that series?
Again, it was talked about, Brad. It was, again, if it wasn't Michael, if it wasn't Scottie, if it wasn't Horace, if it wasn't Phil, it was talked about. This the whole focus piece, it was talked about. And again, we weren't trying to step over Detroit, okay? We knew we had to play Detroit, okay? But we were looking at the bigger picture, okay? And that bigger picture was the championship. It wasn't, again, I'm not trying to eliminate the other team that we had to play against, but the bigger picture was we were just looking at the championship, man. That's what we had our eyes and our focus on, So playing against, again, beating Detroit and then having the opportunity to play against the Lakers when they had, again, one of the best players to play the game, and again, a guy that can actually change and affect the game. Hey, it was the best thing, man. It was the best thing playing in the old form too and winning it there. I mean, that's something that you dream about as a player.
You guys lost the first game of that series.
That's the only one. We lost the first game, and that was it.
That phased you guys at all, or was that just getting the jitters out?
No, it's just I don't know if it was getting the jitters out. It was just, hey, we lost, but again, we knew we had another game. God willing, we had another game. And let's just take advantage. We're not going to worry about the loss. We'll just take advantage of the next game that we get.
I mean, we look at you guys did against Detroit and the Lakers at that time, and you beat them, 8 out of 9 games, those two teams. And that's incredible. And you just wiped them out. And those are two dynasties, essentially. Yeah. So,
and like I said, it was just that vision and that goal. Okay. And we stuck to the plan. and we followed it all the way through. And hey, we were able to be fortunate to win it all.
When, you know, when the clock sounded and you're champions, what did that feel like on the forum floor?
Man, that was the best thing, man. It was, you know, you're out in California with the stars, and you know, again, guys that you see sitting on the court when you're younger, and guys that you know when you're not playing for the Lakers or you're not playing for, you know, like for Chicago. It was the best. I mean, it was the best. You're in la la land, man. So you know, running off that court, going in that locker room, drinking champagne, pouring champagne, having a cigar. I mean, hey man, it's something that you can never, you know, unless you experience. It's man, it's the best thing ever.
Oh, I can't.
Best thing ever.
I mean, I had a couple little league titles, but it's not the same as an NBA title. But yeah, I can't imagine what that's like. And
Yes.
again, for you to have experienced that, I think that's got to be something you look back on, and obviously with a lot of pride, and think I was a part of a championship and one of the greatest championship teams of all time. So, you know, after that experience, what, you know, in your career, I know you ended up going overseas. What happened after that, and what was your experience like going overseas?
Well, before that, you know, I got traded for a game. The next season, I got traded after the fourth game to Sacramento, to the Kings. Okay, which was it brought back the, again, I had energy in Chicago. It was just that playing behind Michael Jordan, minutes were going to be spotty. You know, going out to Sacramento, and Mitch Richmond just got traded a couple weeks before me. You know, again, that just kind of brought back everything, because now I'm playing a lot of minutes. I'm averaging 10.6 points a game. So I'm starting to get it back. You know, Spud Webb, we was at the point guard. You know, Spud likes to pass the basketball. You know, as long as you got open, he was going to get that ball to you. So now that energy started to come back. So, yeah, you know, it was just playing with Wayman Tisdale and those guys. It was just
I just had Pete Chilcutt on the show, actually.
Yeah,
Pete
was on that team. Yep, Pete was on that team, you know. So, you know, that was great. It brought back the energy. And after that year, they wanted to re-sign me. And again, that was one of probably the biggest mistake that I made in the NBA, because I had guaranteed money on the table. The thing was, it was only for 1 year, which would have been okay. And my agent wanted a multi-year deal, but the 1 year would have been okay, because then I would have been an unrestricted free agent after that. Okay. But messing around, him hauling around, and just taking the advice or listening to my agent, as time went on, it was like, hey, Dennis, do you want this or not? And again, I'm following my agent. And I never forget, Brad Sellers was calling me, because he was overseas. He went overseas at that time. He was calling me, listen, take the guaranteed money, man. And then after this year, who's to say what might happen? And he was right, but I didn't do it. They gave the money to Vincent Askew, somebody else, and caused me to go overseas. And again, I loved overseas, but it's no place like home. No place like home. The great thing, Brad, about being overseas was I played in a lot of big time. Well, I ain't gonna say a lot. Every place I played was a big time country. It wasn't like I was in a third world country. Okay, so everything that I had here in the States, I had wherever I was playing. So again, great experience, man, and something I can talk about to my family.
Give us a couple of your favorite memories playing overseas.
You know, just hey, the rowdy fans. You know, rowdy fans, you know, I don't know if you watch a lot of overseas games, but they have these tunnels that kind of roll out to the court, and you run out in the tunnel, because, you know, Europeans, they're throwing everything on the floor, coins, whatever they could find, or whatever they could pull out of their pockets, they're throwing it on the floor. So, you know, again, it's like, man, I'm over here, man, somebody's going to get killed. You get hit by something. But, you know, they were so into their basketball. So that was probably the biggest thing, man, that, you know, I could take away outside of just the experience of meeting new people and being in a different country and listening to how they talk in regards to their language, even though everybody spoke English where I was. It was a great experience.
Where did you play? What country?
I played in Spain. I played in France. I played in Israel. So, yeah, I played in a lot of different places.
I think it's such
all great places.
I was going to say, it's such a unique experience, Dennis, because I've had multiple players on here who played overseas, and they, you know, they said it's very different, but they liked it, and it taught them a lot. And they played against other NBA players over there as well, and other big time college guys. So, you know, in the game, and again, that back then in the 90s, now the game, you can see the international influence on the NBA. Look at Dirk Nowitzki. All the guys have come. It's been Manu and all those guys. And now you have, of course, Luka, and I mean, it's just stop international influence. But back then it wasn't as big. You had a few guys, Drazen and those guys. But again, that era was kind of the beginning of all that.
Yeah, again, it's one thing about Europeans, man. They love Americans. Okay, they love Americans, and when you go over, they love you, but they also pay attention to what we do over here. And you just talked about it earlier. A lot of kids now, they're watching the game and they want to be LeBron James. They want to be AD. They want to be Dwayne Wade. They want to be these guys. So, they practice day in, day out. And over there, they have the junior teams, okay? And they start these kids young. So, and they have great coaching over there as well. So, starting a kid young and they're being coached the right way, and they're watching what we do over here, again, they're going to grow. And the great thing about Europeans, and that's why so many over here playing now, Brad, they play the game the fundamental way. That's why so many of them over here. Our Americans, we're starting to trend away from the fundamental side of the game. And that's what's hurting our kids today, because they see these guys and it's like, well, I want to do what they're doing. Well, you got to be able to play and learn fundamentals first before you start trying to do something else. But that's why Europeans are being so successful over here, because they learn how to play the game the fundamental way.
Give us some examples of, the way they play compared to the way, the Americans play, as far as, is it the shooting's better? Is it just all the fundamentals of just knowing how to pass and dribble the right way? Give us a couple examples.
Everything you just touched on it. They shoot the ball extremely well. Okay. Now that's one thing outside of Seth Curry and some other guys in the NBA. Back in the day, if you shot under 50%, you couldn't shoot. Okay. Now some of these guys are averaging 30+ points a game and they shoot 32% from the field. Okay. So shooting is one, just basic passes. Okay. Great footwork. Now, what you don't get is, you don't see a whole lot of that. You don't see their athleticism. We have the athleticism. Okay. But you know what? If you play the game the right way and you understand the fundamentals of the game, hey man, you're going to be a successful guy. Okay. And like I tell kids, that just play the game the right way. It's the right way and the wrong way. And when you're young, try to learn it the right way. And then as you get older, if you want to start making flashy passes, hey, do what you do. But at the end of the day, learn how to play the game the right way. If you can do that, you're going to be fine. I
think when you look at like a Tim Duncan, for example, and see how fundamentally sound he was, obviously Shaq named him the big fundamental. But I mean, 5 rings speaks for itself. And it wasn't just Tim, obviously. You had Manu and Tony as well, and the great Greg Popovich. But, Tim, when I watched him, he was never flashy. And he really wasn't in many ways an exciting guy to watch, because he didn't do anything. Shaq was, doing his stuff, and you had all these other guys who were more exciting, but Tim was just consistent every game. You watch him and he knew how to set a pick the right way. He knew how to, he knew what he was doing underneath. And I feel like what you're describing is a lot of what a guy like Tim Duncan kind of, and he, even though he came from, Wake Forest and America, but like he just had that fundamental soundness to him, and it won him 5 championships. And
go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I said we don't. I think you're right. We don't see that as much. I'm surprised more kids don't idolize a Tim Duncan. And I know he's not flashy. He's not a Steph Curry. He's not a a LeBron. But if you look at what it got him, and all those guys in that team, it got him 5 rings. You would think that would be more of a thing now, but it doesn't seem like, even all my nephews, they all want to be, Steph Curry and LeBron.
And it's funny because you know what? If Michael, and I'm just using Michael, and Tim walked out the same door into a crowd, who is everybody going to gravitate to?
Oh, MJ.
Probably MJ, right? And like you just said, you just use the word flashy, high flying, dunking, this and that. Tim wasn't that, but you know what? He was just as efficient. Okay. And that's what kids have to understand. We want you to be efficient. Okay. If you can be efficient, you can be successful. You can. And Tim is a great example, like you said, basic fundamental basketball player.
That's exactly what it was. And we have a kid on Cleveland right now, Colin Sexton, and he's kind of coming up in the ring. He's really starting to get his game in order, and he's a really fun young talent to watch. And he's not as flashy. He's quick, and but he's really he's pretty efficient. If you watch him, he's getting more and more efficient as his career goes on. And I think, JB Bickerstaff's the coach, and I really think he's coaching them up well. And the Cavs are actually playing pretty efficient ball right now. They spread the ball very well, and they have a young team, but it's a lot of the points you're getting at is that when you play that way, and even the Warriors, for those of, the younger people watching who love Golden State, they passed a lot. I mean, they played fundamental. Yeah, they can shoot from 60 feet away. We know what Steph and Clay can do, but the point is they know how to cut and pass. And then
That's right.
If you watch their offense, it's actually pretty efficient. It's not just Steph and Clay hogging the ball. It's those guys moving around and playing off each other, especially back when they won those championships. So, with Durant, it was a little bit different because he's such a different type of talent. But when it was before Durant, they were really a fun team to watch. I hated watching them because I was a Cleveland fan, but they were a fun team to watch because they did spread the ball around, and anybody can hurt you on that court, and they all could shoot, they all could cut. So I think what you're saying is very true, and I'm just surprised more players and teams aren't going in that direction.
Well, it's an art to it. It's an art to it. Like you said, hey, I need to know if Brad gives me the ball, what Brad, he might set somebody up, go back door. Okay. That's an art, okay? And everybody can't do that. Now, I think a lot of the problems with guys today, okay, it starts early, okay? It starts with your biddies, okay? Your biddy programs, all right? And like you just said, you got nephews that want to be X, Y, and Z. Again, those guys had to crawl before they walked, okay? But a lot of kids now, they want to start walking. They want to start running before they crawl in regards to sports. And it's so unfortunate to where you're not paying, you have to really pay attention, okay, to a player, all right, and not look at certain things, but you got to look at the fundamental side of how they're playing that leads up to making something flashy, but see, they just see the flashy part and they skip the fundamental side. So yeah, it's an art to this thing, and that's why everybody can't do it, because it's an art to it. It's an art to it.
That's a great way to describe it, an art form. That's really what it is, and it's we'll see where the game goes. But do you think when you look at your game, being the scorer that you were, do you think your game would translate better into today's NBA?
I think it would, because what they do now is they get up and down, Brad. They get up and down. So getting up and down, there's so many gaps, okay, when you're getting up and down, because defense doesn't have a whole lot of time to set up. Back in the day, it was half-court basketball, okay? So now you got 10 big guys, okay, in a half-court setting, and you really had to have a lot of skill in order to score the game, in order to score the ball. I'm sorry. You had to have skill, okay? And I'm not saying that they don't have skill now, because they do have skill now. But now, again, transition defense, you have a lot of gaps. Unless they're closed, they're shutting the driving lanes down. There's so many gaps where guys can do so many things. I mean, you can get a guy that will grab a rebound, dribble it the length of the court, and get a layup. Okay? Back in the day, you just didn't see that. You just didn't see that because, again, everything was slow it down, half-court basketball. So to answer your question, I think I could have survived in today's game with the athleticism and the shooting ability and the ball handling.
I feel like your game would have translated very well. I really do. I think that just the way you could score the ball in general, like you said, it's just a different game today. Back then, it was revolved around the bigs and the Patrick Ewing, Robinsons, those guys. Now it's kind of the opposite. It's revolved around wings and guards and guys who can get around.
And everybody's on the perimeter. Everybody's out on the perimeter. I mean,
even the bigs are on the perimeter. Yeah.
What traditional big do you have nowadays? Okay, which is hurting a lot of traditional bigs in college, because now, if you're a GM, it's like, well, do I draft this guy because Kevin Durant is playing on the perimeter? Can he guard Kevin Durant? I don't think so, okay? Is he efficient enough to be a traditional big where we can pound the ball inside and he can get us a lot of points? Shaquille O'Neal, I don't know. Is there anybody in the league like Shaquille O'Neal now? I mean, I don't know, but at the end of the day, man, it's a perimeter game. And I give these guys credit because you're Kevin Durant and people that's big enough to be efficient on the perimeter. You just didn't have that back then. And I can look at a person like a Brad Sellers. Okay, Brad could play. He could play on the perimeter. Okay, but people looked at him like, well, you're 7'1", you got to be in the post. But Brad could do exactly what you see a lot of these guys that play on the perimeter today do. Brad Sellers could do that back in the day. But again, the game has changed. It just, that wasn't the type of game back in the day.
When I was talking to Pete Chilcutt, he said the same thing. He goes, people would tell him you're 6'10". He's like, get inside.
He was the same way. That's right.
He likes shooting the ball. And he goes, now my game would be perfect for the NBA.
That's right.
But back then it wasn't like that. It just,
That's right.
So Who was the toughest guy you ever had to face outside of MJ?
Well, I'm gonna tell you something, man, and it's funny. There's so many of them, okay? Because again, now we just got through talking about the traditional game and traditional bigs. If you were a 2 and a 3 back in the day, most plays were ran for 2 and 3s, or you pounded it in the paint. Okay, what am I saying? That means that Daryl Dawkins might be setting the screen to get his teammate open. Okay, somebody that I might be guard. Okay, so now I'm trying to get around screen so I can guard a Jeff Malone, or I can guard a Hersey Hawkins, or I can guard a Michael Jordan, or I can guard Ricky Pierce. There were so many great 2s and 3s back then, and our job was tough because we trying to run around all these bigs, get through screens, because these guys could get the ball so fast, turn and shoot. So, to answer your question, those positions back in the day, hey man, it was a lot of good 2s and 3s back then that could score the basketball. So again, outside of Michael, Dale Ellis that played in Seattle.
Oh yeah.
There's a ton of guys, man. So it's a lot to answer your question.
Yeah, there was a ton of guys back then who were. I mean, like it's funny because I look back at like the mid '80s to the or early 2000s, and those 2s and 3s of that era. I mean, there were so many. I mean, not even counting Reggie and all the other guys later
That's
on.
Right.
Guys like
That's
Jeff
right.
Hornacek, and on and on. And then point guards really. I feel there's a lot of underrated point guard, Mark Price and people like that. You had, of course, it was just a very interesting group of guys, and I feel like the bigs got a lot of the attention, and Michael got a lot of the attention, and of course Hakeem and Patrick and those guys. But you're right, the Jeff Malone's you mentioned, and guys like the Hersey.
Ron Harper,
Ron Harper.
Eagle.
Yep.
Yeah, they all. I mean, everybody was tough to guard at that position because you had to do so much work to try to guard them. Okay, to where, hey man, you get caught on the screen and Jeff Malone got the ball. Hey, his shot was so fast you couldn't get to it. You couldn't get to it. So you're trying to fight through screens, and then you're trying to guard the majority of the guys that could shoot the basketball. If they had an inch of daylight, it could knock it down.
Did you get to play against Drazen Petrovic?
Yeah, he was in Portland, I think.
He was
before he came over.
I think he might have got traded for Buck, actually, if I'm not mistaken. I think
to New Jersey.
Yeah,
he was in Portland. But see, when he was in Portland, he didn't play a whole lot.
No, you're right.
Again, you talk about Clyde Drexler and Terry Porter.
Yep.
So it's tough. It was tough back then.
Yeah, there's so many great players. I mean, what an era that was. So when you look back at your career, what do you want, especially the younger generation didn't get to see you play, what do you want them to know about, your legacy?
A person that had an opportunity, I tried to make the most of what I had. Again, I averaged over 10 points a game in the league for my career. I had some injuries along the way. I thought I was resilient and bounced back. But I think, a guy that took a situation and turned it into something, but a guy that didn't have expectations to be a professional when he started at Ohio State, but a guy that was able to make it, and a guy that was able to, again, some of these guys, they go in and McDonald's All-American. I wasn't a McDonald's All-American, okay? But I was a guy that took something and turned it into something big time, and being a third pick was an honor because I guess somebody felt that, hey, I was more than deserving. I put myself in this situation, so hey, we're gonna draft you here. And again, I didn't start Ohio State, or I didn't grow up as a kid saying that I wanted to be an NBA player. I mean, I wasn't that type of kid. So just a guy that tried, and a guy that took an opportunity and tried to make the most of it.
And what are you up to nowadays?
I'm the head coach at Lourdes University, an NAIA school here in Toledo, Ohio, in the suburbs in Savannah, Ohio.
How's that going for you?
Last year was my first year.
Oh, really? Okay. How do you like it so far?
I like it. We won 20 games last year. Very competitive league. At one point in time last year, we were in first place for 3/4 of the year,
Wow.
And they picked us to finish 7th. And at one point in time, we won 11 in a row. All right. So again, I like it because it gives me the opportunity to share a lot of information that I've learned through my journey, in life and as a basketball player. And like I tell the kids, hey, if you want it, I can give it to you. I can't make you take it, but if it's something that you want to receive, I'm going to give it to you. So again, I've been around the game. Actually went back to Ohio State and graduated when I retired. at the age of 41 and had a year and a half to do. Went back, got my degree, and I started coaching with Rolly Massimino after that.
Oh, yeah, Rolly. Wow.
Yeah. And then I went from Rolly, NAIA school in Florida. I went to Bowling Green State University with Louis Orr.
Yep.
For 5 years, and now I'm doing my own thing.
That's great to hear. I mean, coaching, my brother's a coach as well, and he played in an NAIA school called Rio Grande in Southern Ohio.
Yeah. No, Rio. Yeah, we beat them last year. We played them in the tournament last year and beat them. So tell your brother, man, we beat
yeah, he'll be listening to this podcast. So he was actually a two-time MVP at that back then it was the Mid-Ohio Conference back in the 90s, early 90s. So, and there was like actually Bernie Bickerstaff went to Rio Grande. So, you know, it was, he knows Bernie and all those guys. But anyways, yeah, so I'm very familiar with the NAIA, and, you know, it was a very competitive conference back then when he was in it. So it's that's cool. I'll have to tell him that.
Let him know.
I'm gonna trust me. I'm gonna hassle him. But so, you know, the last thing I'll ask you is, I'm gonna put you on the spot here for a second.
Okay.
You know, you play with MJ, and you know, so you had that experience, and obviously you're an Ohio State guy, Ohio guy, so you know LeBron. Who, if you had to go into one game or to one season, you know, what is out of those two guys, who do you like and why?
You know, you get that question all the time, but most of the time actually you can add LeBron, but you can add Kobe, I should say. You mentioned LeBron. You know, it's one of those things where I love him, man. I love LeBron. I love what he does for his community. I love what he does for the game of basketball, and you know, I love Michael as well. You know, I think to both of their defense, I think they were very, 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 very effective in the eras that they played in. Okay. So again, if we're talking this era, I love LeBron James. Okay. If we're talking an early era, I love Michael Jordan. Okay. I think they've mastered their games. I think they've mastered their craft. Okay. And I think that they're very, very efficient / effective in the era that they're playing in. Okay. And you know what? It's hard to compare, but what I will say is they're both winners. They're both great players, and both of them are champions.
That's a great answer. And I usually don't ask that question, Dennis, because I think it's kind of a cliche question. Everyone asks it nowadays. But I only ask you because you did play with MJ and because you're from Ohio, have the Ohio State connection. Of course, LeBron's a big Ohio State, you know, backer and all. But I you know, it's a question I think I feel similar to you, where I feel like they're both great players. I mean, what does it matter? You know, and we could always pick their games apart and say this guy does this better or that better, but they're both champions. They're both great players. They're both really two of the top, you know, you could argue they're the two best, if not two of the top 5 of all time. And, you know, I don't know, it doesn't, to me, it's kind of a silly question because like you said, in their eras, they were the best. So Kobe too. Kobe for a period of years, you know, as well. So, you know, I loved your answer to that.
Man, I appreciate it. Thank you.
So I wanted to, you know, thank you for coming on tonight. And I mean, this is a great conversation. It was fun having you on, having a Buckeye legend, especially because I'm a big Ohio State fan. So this is a treat for me tonight.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me, man. And like I say, man, I love Ian, man. I love Kenny, man. And you guys had a great show last week. So I appreciate you reaching out and allowing me to come on and share my story as well.
All right, man. I really appreciate you coming on. Enjoy your weekend, okay?
All right, Brad. You too. Thanks, man.
You too, Dennis. Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye.